the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
There we go. All right. Hello and welcome to Technical Difficulties with the Badgers. Why it went ballistic today, I cannot tell. I looked at everything I could look at to try to fix it. Ended up having to restart OBS, and it seems like OBS was the problem. That's the actual software application that we use to stream, so I can't just not use it. So once I restarted it, it seems like it's all right. So cross your fingers and don't hold your breath because it's probably gonna be a long show. But hopefully what was happening before will not happen again, and we will not have any further technical difficulties, and we can talk about stuff. So hello and welcome to HBR Talk 331. The patriarchy is killing women via forced birth now? I am your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren Brooks. And tonight, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, actually. We're going to talk about that main subject.
None of these things went wrong. I'm going to erase all of the things that went wrong, so that when you go to our what's it called?
When you
the thing where we upload these things to Spreaker, the thing where we upload these podcasts, and I erase all the things that went wrong, you won't even know that anything went wrong. I keep trying to tell everyone, just don't bother talking about the things went wrong.
Well, unfortunately, there are people
Go
listening
straight into
live.
the show.
Yeah, but there are people listening live, and they deserve an explanation. So we're going to do that.
Fuck them. They don't
That's
matter.
A lot
Nobody
of people.
matters.
Do you understand how much of a body count I would have? My husband would be very upset.
Even the people listening live aren't interested in what went wrong.
Yeah.
They just want us
Well,
to go there.
they're gonna
into the
listen
show
to
and
it because
start talking about the show.
They're gonna listen to it because I'm the host. Haha. So basically, yeah. The upshot is I fixed it, and I'm not sure exactly how, other than by starting OBS. I undid something that OBS is doing in the background, or was doing in the background. So cross your fingers. Like I said, don't hold your breath because it might be a long show, because we got a lot of shit to talk about, and it's all very important. So before we get into the meat...
But in the meantime, I don't have one of those the party poopers.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm trying to make the sound of a
We're
pipe.
not there yet. We're not there yet.
We're in the good timeline. Yay! At least until further notice.
Yeah. So, I lost my train of thought.
Never mind your train of thought.
Well,
just be happy, Hannah.
I think my train of thought actually was on the same track as the Trump train somewhere. But yeah, I was leading up to something I was going to say that I wanted to introduce.
But I guess in the
Is it
meantime,
what's on screen?
you have to do your
No.
spiel. So do your spiel, and you'll figure it out while you're doing your
Okay,
spiel.
so no, that's what I was. We have a lot to talk about tonight, so bear with us. The topic is probably a few minutes away because we have some other things that we're going to introduce first. So don't get mad that the topic is not the first thing that we're talking about, because that I get that all the time from people. So just listen, it's coming up, and if you want to be happy about it or pissed off about it or whatever, be that when it comes up, because there's a whole bunch. So the first thing is Trump won. Suck it, feminists.
Yeah, boy!
Woohoo!
Patriarchy won, feminist 0.
Yes.
All right? Patriarchy 1, feminist 0. And this, I will say it that way because everything before Trump won stops mattering after Trump won. Now, I'm not going to say that everything is going to change tomorrow and everything's fixed on January 1st and all that. We know there's a lot of hard work that is still coming up. And so we're going to be doing this show on the topic of debunking some feminist claims about the patriarchy, because false allegations are my primary issue as a men's rights activist. That's what got me off my ass and doing, instead of just being sympathetic. So because I've seen a shitload of guys in my life, just personally, guys that I know, going through false allegations. And a lot of those false allegations are facilitated by the type of false allegations that we're addressing tonight. Right? So that's the first thing. Trump won, feminist 0. And then the second thing is, in light of that, I expect to see people stepping up their activism, even if it's just louder advocacy, more frequent advocacy, more social media posts, more sharing of MRA content. You don't have to go march in the streets. You don't have to go visit your representatives. That Overton window moving the way that it has moved is the reason why we don't have a feminist in chief right now in the office. In the office that determines whether the United States makes war on half the world, the office that determines whether or not men get conscripted, the office that determines how stupid and dumbed down our population is going to be by our own education system, the office that determines what rights fathers have to protect their children from being badly raised in single mother homes in under the poverty level, right? These are things that we can't have a feminist in charge of. And men are the reason Trump got into office. You did it. Men stepped up in record numbers and voted for Trump. And it doesn't even matter if Trump does everything he says he's going to do. It matters that he's not going to do everything that Kamala said she was going to do. I hope he does everything he said he was going to do. I really do. I hope he tears down the bureaucracy. I hope he changes policy in regard to the education system and in regard to the divorce system and due process rights and so on, in order to protect civil rights that have been taken away from men and restore them and prevent them from being infringed on again. I hope all those things happen. But I'm just happy that there is not an unaccountable woman in the White House right now. And I hope that women, aside from the idiots that are out there advocating for the adoption of I think it's South Korean feminism that has like the 4 no's and they're not going to have sex with men and they're not going to reproduce. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you guys can go the way of the Shakers. Like if you guys don't know who the Shakers are, there's a reason. Look it up. Like, not it's making not having sex one of your tenets of faith. Like, not having sex at all, not having children at all, one of your tenets of faith, kind of destroys your ability to maintain your population and grow as a
Oh
faith.
no, the blue-haired wine aunt cat ladies aren't going to have sex anymore. Oh no, how
Yeah.
can we possibly survive as
So,
a species?
yeah.
I think we'll get by.
I'm not worried. In fact, I hope that they do everything they say they're going to do, because then their way of thinking will just die out. Right? That'd be great.
Well, I mean, exactly, because their way of thinking is ultimately the feminist goal, the destruction
Right.
of the family, the not just the family, but society, to the point where we don't even want to copulate. We don't even want to procreate. And that's where we are now. I mean, well, to an extent,
Yeah.
but these are the things that these women are saying openly, like proudly. They don't even know what they're asking for. They don't even know what they're saying. They're just saying it because it makes them feel good. They have this sense of, selfish or self-righteousness about them, that I'm just not gonna, I'm standing on principles, and I'm finally not gonna let random dudes fuck me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job, ladies.
Now it's
Good job.
This has been a self-depleting force throughout all history. This is why you've never seen this as a recordably historical force throughout history. Because wherever they came about, people were like, "Well, okay, don't have kids, and you'll just die out," and it worked for all of history. But the only reason it's come about in the last couple of 100 years is because of this. I don't even know what to attribute it to. It's because it's taken off in universities, and the Overton window has since been pushed in that direction to the point where they can even affect even a growing minority of the population, where they can convince a large amount of women to just not have children.
Yeah.
It's like I say, it's only worked recently because they can get through to such a large amount of people, and I can't articulate how it's worked in the last 1,000 years. But I think it's largely because of the education system and the media system. And thank God that you finally elected a government that's going to gut the education system and the media system.
Yeah, I would love to see, like, all of the things that the government has been doing to support the misinformation that's coming out of the media, the feminist narratives, the feminist attacks on men and men's civil rights and human rights, on the family and so on. Like, all the things the government's been done to facilitate that. If all those things just stopped, that would be enough. The government doesn't have to do anything anti-feminist. The government doesn't have to do anything. I would prefer the government not do anything. Like, I would rather not have a government, but if we're going to have one, I would like to see it cut down to the bare minimum, doing almost nothing, and being focused on things like keeping us from having an attack on our soil, and keeping it easy for interstate commerce to take place. Like, those are good purposes for a federal government if we really have to have one, right? Aside from that, we don't really need it to do a bunch of other things. It just needs to quit everything that doesn't involve relationships with other countries, and our economic relationships and our security relationships with other countries, and keeping open communications and travel and trade between the states. Like, that's enough. And honestly, the federal government shouldn't even be the one maintaining the military. That should be up to the states too. It should just be facilitating it if it's doing anything. But if we had that, a lot of the problems that Trump got elected to address would never have existed in the first place. But that's the first thing that I want to point out. So, yeah, we are celebrating. And as to the feminists that are having their temper tantrums and threatening to have a sex strike, the theme response to that is, Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody
got
cares.
to make that song.
Cares.
Call out to the Gulag Singers. We have to do that. That's a necessary upcoming project.
Yes.
Absolutely. But the next thing I want to talk about, and this is important, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the show topic, but it is pertinent today, and I want to make sure that people have this information. It's what's on your screen. So Mankind Initiative posted a tweet. I have pinned a tweet, a quote tweet of this tweet on my account, my post, my X account, so that people can find this. And I don't want you to retweet me or repost my post. I want you to click on the quoted post and repost that. Post it everywhere. Use the hashtag. Repost with comment so people will see it. Point it out. This is a list of Mankind's directory of services for men who are experiencing domestic abuse. And so November has International Men's Day. It is after October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, which we tweeted and posted on other social media and talked a bit about the fact that most domestic abuse is female perpetrated against male victims, and people are not really aware of it because there's been that burgeoning feminist industry to exploit men and to exploit sympathy for women and break up families using these allegations. But this provision of resources for men who are going through it is vital to preventing the damage that gets done. And it's not... A lot of people think of domestic violence against men as women futilely engaging in, pounding and slapping and yelling and nagging and stuff. There are women that have poured boiling water on their partners. There are women who have stabbed their partners. There are women who have hit their partners with frying pans made out of iron. Women who have starved their partners, economically abused their partners. Like, there is very serious abuse that takes place. And even if there wasn't, it's still not okay to hit someone just because they're bigger and stronger than you.
Yeah, and one of the easiest things to just omit from your thought process is the fact that, people who live together, one of them has to go to sleep eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when a man is vulnerable. He's the most vulnerable because he does not know what's happening to him. And that's when women will fucking attack and do it in the most brutal of ways, as we saw with Lorena Bobbitt.
Yeah.
Right? In his sleep, cut his genitals off.
Which could have killed him.
Yes. Yes. And it was the laughingstock of the media for the next couple of weeks, if not months.
Years, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
It went on for years. And I mean...
To this day, in fact.
It's... People treat it as a joke because it happened to a man.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had done something of equal personal threat and intimate threat to her, or even a lesser threat, it would be the outrage of the century.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
There is no equivalent, by the way, because as I said in my last video, men have genitals on the outside of their bodies. Women have breasts on the outside of their bodies, but it's...
Yeah, but we don't have the blood vessel concentration.
It's difficult to
there.
cut off someone's breasts in their sleep without
Right.
waking them up. You can do it quite easily with a sharp enough object to a man's genitalia. This is one of those ways in which men are vulnerable. In a way women are not. That they're one swift... I mean, garden shears can do it. A sufficiently sharp knife
she just used a knife.
with a sufficiently... Yeah,
Mhm.
any knife can do it. Men have a vulnerability that women don't. I know this is difficult to get across to people because they're so brainwashed into thinking that women have all the problems, especially when it comes to the genital region. But this is one of those areas in which men are more vulnerable. But
Yeah.
this is hard to get across to people because the very idea of men being vulnerable is just rubs people the wrong way. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, the idea that that women can be culpable rubs people the wrong way as well. Even if you recognize men's vulnerability, feminists like to redirect. Well, most people who harm men are other men, but not when it comes to domestic violence, right? Men are not as protected as women from violence on the street that is caused by social ills that lead to people engaging in thievery and trying to hide criminal activities. They're more likely to not do anything to a woman if they see her, and also women are less likely to be to put themselves in dangerous situations like that to get to and from work or other necessary things in their lives. That men have to take those risks. The women don't necessarily have to take those risks. Well, when it comes to domestic violence, men are significantly less protected than women by the state. Women are incredibly protected by the state to the degree that it really only happens when women choose to be in an environment with one of the few men who is willing to harm them, or a man who doesn't have the control to refrain from fighting back if provoked, because 70% of domestic violence victims who don't fight back with physical violence are men. Right? Only women can get away with that, and so most men don't do that. And the majority of victims of violence that goes two-way are also men. Two-way violence is associated with more violence from women, but not with more violence from men. So women are more frequently violent when the violence is two-way, meaning that women are initiating more of the time than men are initiating. And they're probably also retaliating more of the time than men are retaliating. And so you have a significant amount of violence coming from women, right? And men do not have the assistance they need from the state. That's why I wanted to highlight this tweet, this post on X, because this is vital information for men who need assistance. So like I said, if you are on X, and if you follow me, you can go to my profile already. If you don't follow me, we'll go back here. Let's see if this will go back to my post. This is my username right here. And the too dangerous for Facebook thing is because I posted a link on Facebook to one of my own articles that I wrote, and Facebook took it down as being from a dangerous group of people. So obviously, I'm dangerous. So
And for everything the new administration is talking about make America healthy again, they're gonna fix our dietary habits. They're proposing to fix the problem of biological men competing in women's sports. They're gonna fix all the problems of all these men coming across the border. But
I
I don't
keep telling
hear.
them an easy way to fix that. If you want to get biological men out of women's sports, you take a year or two and you desegregate sports entirely. No gender segregation whatsoever. There will be no benefit to competing as a woman.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. They're obviously not. They're obviously not going to take it all the way to the end point in order to try and teach people to teach these people a lesson, because these people
Well, it's not to teach him a lesson.
aren't going to learn that lesson.
It is to demonstrate that, if it's true, and I think it is. I think there are a significant amount of people who do not have a sense of sportsmanship, who are engaging in this, guys that don't have a sense of sportsmanship, who are competing against women because it's easier, which kind of is an admission of failure on their part, in my opinion. And then there's a very small number of maybe actual trans women who are caught in the crossfire of all of this, right? But I would bet you that the overwhelming majority of instances where a biological male is competing in women's sports, it's because they know that, contrary to feminist narratives, on average, men outperform women athletically in pretty much every way, in pretty much every sport. The only thing that women can outperform men on is sports where flexibility is the primary benefit, the primary skill required to do the sport. So unless a guy has a disorder like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that causes joint hypermobility, women are going to outperform men in contortionist sports, right? But in any case, yeah, you could fix the problem entirely by taking that benefit away for a little while. It would immediately prove, because I think that it would almost disappear. The issue would almost disappear of biological men competing in women's sports. It would suck for women for a few years, but if women were like men, they would be willing to make that sacrifice in order to gain the evidence that's needed to put the kibosh to that issue. But instead, we're probably going to see a very hard fight between Democrats and Republicans, and there's going to be allegations of isms and phobias on both sides. And to be fair, and I've been a female athlete. I was a hurdler on my track team in high school, and I was fourth place in my league of various schools. And then I was also a cross-country runner, and I sucked fat steaming donkey balls at that. I came in last in every race, and it wasn't really about winning for me against other people. It was about winning against my asthma, so that didn't matter. But I was a good hurdler. Not as good as the gal I ran with. She was a state champion in more than one event. But, just as personally, as an athlete, having seen, and as a journalist, because I was working as a journalist at the time as well, having seen what women did to men's sports over the last 20, 30 years, actually over the last 50 years since Title IX came about, and then immediately went from being about academics to being about sports, I don't have a lot of sympathy, right? The girls today that are in sports are benefiting from 50 years of women tearing down men's sports instead of building up women's sports. So y'all are I'm sorry that it's falling on Generation Z and Generation Alpha, but y'all are reaping what Boomer women and Gen X women, and to a degree Millennial women, sowed. And it should be mad at them, not men.
For everything Trump's talking about, for everything Elon Musk is talking about, for everything RFK is talking about, they're only talking about pushing back on all these ways in which biological men are oppressing biological women in women's sports and health and what have you. They're really not talking about any of the stuff we were talking about back in 2014.
Yeah.
So it's I know it seems like a push forward.
We still have a lot to do.
In terms of what we were talking about 10 years ago, I mean, it's only the first step. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Or it might even a lot more than the next 4 years for any of them to get hold of what us in the men's rights movement have been talking about for the last 10, 20 years. where it's not just about, men who call themselves women oppressing women who call themselves women.
Yeah, I'm gonna go so far as to say that women are not oppressed by this. All right. And this is a lot of people. What I'm about to say, this isn't gonna sit right with you, and that's fine. You can disagree with me. You can talk about it in the comments. This is my stance on it. All right. As a person with disabilities who participated in sports with other people with disabilities, and including a friend of mine who participated as a shot putter who had cerebral palsy, and did better than average. I'm against the idea that we should coddle athletes in any way. And I do think that the gender division is a type of coddling. I don't think that it's wrong necessarily for there to be a gender division, but I think that women have created an environment in which they don't have any right to complain about losing it. So, going back to my childhood, my early childhood, in the 70s, when I was a little kid and not yet involved in high school sports, just playing little girls softball, we didn't use a locker room or anything like that, right? There were journalists, female journalists, that were fighting for access to the locker rooms of male athletes after their athletic performance in whatever sport that they were engaging in, competing in. And this was a one-sided thing, right? Nobody was fighting for male journalists to have access to the locker rooms of female athletes after their athletic performance was over. It was just women wanting access to the locker rooms of men. And as soon as they got that, they did. They started going in and doing interviews and everything. And within a very short time, less than a year, I want to say, afterward, the first article came out about how sexist the men in the locker rooms were for using the locker rooms for their intended purposes, despite the fact that there were women coming in there to interview them. It took zero time for women to demand that men change their use of the environment for its intended purpose because the women were in there, after assuring the public that they were not going to do that. And then when I was in high school and I was actually doing photography for a local newspaper, and I was working with other photojournalists on the sidelines of various athletic events and everything, but especially football, there were discussions going on about it because there was this lawsuit, this impending lawsuit. And this, I can't remember the name of the woman that sued, but she basically made allegations of misconduct because of this demand that men not use their locker rooms for the purpose that locker rooms were created for if there were women coming in there to interview them. Right? It's abuse of women if they invade your naked space and you don't suddenly stop going about your business and put some clothes on or something, if you want to talk football today. It's just like that. To me, that was really embarrassing when that happened. I didn't want to go into the locker rooms. I wasn't interviewing anybody. I was doing photography. So, granted, I'm not interested in going where the players are naked. I'm interested in going where the players are making plays that I want to get great pictures of and everything. So I was always only on the sidelines. I didn't have to worry about that, right? As far as the division between men and women in sports, boys and girls in sports, I noticed personally that I benefited from running against both sexes and from running against people that were significantly better than me at what I was doing. I don't think I ever would have lettered. I don't think I ever would have placed if I hadn't had a state champion that I was trying to catch up to. And I don't think that I would have been as good at it as I was if I hadn't also been practicing with the boys. So I don't like the idea that it's considered oppression if boys and girls and men and women are competing with each other. And there are some obvious exceptions, like sports where there is direct person-to-person competition of strength and toughness, where you're not just like the strongman events where you're throwing logs and stuff like that, but where you're actually wrestling each other or boxing each other, or I think even mock weapons fights of different types use weight classes. That's fair. And I believe that men and women of different weights would go into different weight classes, and the heaviest weight would probably be all men, because men's bones weigh more than women's bones, and then men have a heavier muscle structure than women do. And I think those weight divisions might make a big difference as far as competition goes in women's ability to compete with men of their weight class and so on. Now, I don't think that it's necessarily going to always be the case, but for instance, the Olympic boxer that there was that big controversy about, everybody jumped the gun on talking about this individual. They did confirm. God, I can't think of his name. However, they're identifying. But the individual that was proved to have testicles, like internal testicles. This is a intersex condition.
You mean that Middle Eastern looking
that person.
Yeah.
So now would be the time, like, this is where people can jump in and say, yes, this is a male participating in women's sport. Somebody that was raised as a girl, somebody that isn't going to have the same advantages as a full-on non-intersex male, and isn't going to have all of the disadvantages of a woman either, right? But there were women who beat that boxer in previous events. That's not a boxer that has won every event. And so it is possible for women to compete with males and win. I mean, I did that when I was in high school too. I should have run the 400, and I didn't. But at practice I did. And we went all out because I come from a community where we have a lot of fun doing stuff like that, right? And I beat everybody but 3 people on my team. Had an asthma attack in the middle of it. Finished during the asthma attack, but I came in 4th on my team, including all the boys. And one of the other people who beat me was a girl. So half of the winners were girls and half of the winners were boys on the team. And I had the same experience I tried out the boys' hurdles because they had the high hurdles, right? And we had the medium hurdles. And I could run those because I was tall. So, and I beat some of the boys doing that too. So it's not a cut and dried issue. And I don't think oppression is the narrative that should be considered when it comes to this. The issue is one of whether or not the competition is rigorous and sportsmanlike, and I wouldn't have run hurdles against a 5-year-old, for instance. I wouldn't have tried to run the high hurdles against somebody that was 5'2". Especially not another girl, because it's not sportsmanlike. Anthony Huber says 400 meters. Yeah, that's all it took to cause an asthma attack, was sprinting a lousy 400 meters.
Emmanuel Khalif, I believe
Khalif. That's what I'm talking about.
His name.
Yeah.
this was all sorted out in the original Olympic Games because it was only men who were allowed to compete. Well, I guess it was everyone who was allowed to compete in the Olympic Games in its original inception. Like if you were a woman who was able to compete alongside the men, then by all means you could do so.
Yeah.
And if you were a man with a micro penis and balls that had been sucked up inside his body, then you were perfectly able to compete.
Well, technically they're not sucked up. They just never they start out internal in utero, and eventually they descend. They're undescended. They don't come out.
The whole dispute was already considered by, like, if you're anyone, male, female, intersex, whatever, if you can compete alongside all the other best athletes, then by all means give it a go. The only reason Emmanuel Khalifa or Remain Khalifa or whatever was able to compete in the first place was because he was able to compete in the women's competition as a man. And the only reason that was able to happen was because of this sort of bizarre reimagination of gender, or what we call gender, and this only ever became a problem when women developed their own competition, and that threw up into obscurity this whole idea of what the difference is between a man and a woman.
Although, to be fair, 50 years ago, when women's competitions were they weren't new. Like, women have been competing in the Olympics for since early in the 20th century, right? They didn't have the technology to confirm the undescended testicles and micropenis that they confirmed in this instance, right? They didn't. He would have been able to compete as a woman due to a lack, maybe not 50 years ago, but 80 years ago, due to a lack of any evidence, because they would not have been able to find the evidence. They would have said, yeah, this is a very masculine-looking woman, but a gynecological exam would not have demonstrated that this was a biological male. So what we're looking at in that particular instance is that technology has made it possible to more strictly segregate sports. And there were girls I ran against in high school that looked every bit as masculine. So, and I've had people suggest that I look that masculine, especially if they view me from particular angles where my jaw is more prominent in the picture. And I've even had people accuse me of having an Adam's apple if the shadows hit wrong, which I don't. And I've had a DNA test. I'm fully 2X chromosome. Like that's not my mutation. The mutation I have is the motherfucker gene. I just have to find a way to make my body work better with folate. That's it. It's a lot easier to deal with. And I don't have most of the health conditions that can be associated with that. Just some of the really bad ones. But you can't look at the situation and say this is cut and dried, because it's not.
It could all easily be cut and dried if we just said whoever qualifies.
Qualifies, yeah.
If we did that, then no women would qualify, and that's why so many feminists were like, well, you can't do this because then no women would qualify.
Yeah.
And we need women to qualify because you can't just have a competition where everyone is male. That's misogynistic or whatever. And you can extend that to all kinds of things, such as like government and or like whoever can lead government and whoever can vote for government.
Yeah.
But that's different. because men and women have different bodies, but they don't have different minds. Well, they do have different minds, but I guess that's not the point. Is it the point? I guess it is the
No.
point.
Yeah, the bottom line for me is that the allegation of oppression by not giving women their own special space is in my opinion, it's disproven by the fact that more and more specific medical information has had to be used to disqualify people who have been raised as females and competed as females, that have been defeated by females from participating in female specific sports. So, with that said, and again, I'm going to remind people, if you follow me on X, go to my profile, look at my pinned tweet, and if you're watching this like 2 or 3 years from now, and it's not my pinned tweet anymore, because I do change my pinned tweet frequently, I haven't posted a lot to hashtag Men You Are Not Alone, because I wanted to highlight this. So just search my profile name that you see there, and the hashtag, and you'll find it. Right, and retweet that, repost that, post the information. Go to the website and post the link yourself, and just highlight it for people to have it, because it is very important for me to know. But with all of that said, it's 8 o'clock already. Let's get to the rat killing. I wanted to talk about this false allegation that is, I'm already seeing it batted around. Like, the election was on Tuesday, right? Wednesday morning, it was confirmed that definitely Trump was elected. And by Wednesday evening, I saw the first, women are going to die en masse. The patriarchy is using forced birth to murder women. Rape victims are not going to be able to get their abortions and blah, blah. So, before I get into that, there are 2 things I got to do. The first one is full disclosure. I'm pro-life. Everybody knows I'm pro-life. And also full disclosure, I'm ANCAP. I don't think the government needs to be involved in that. If there's going to be laws about murder, I don't think abortion should be an exception to those laws. Right? The same conditions should apply. You have the right to self-defense, but you don't have the right to kill somebody because they're inconvenient to you. But I don't think there should have to be some separate narrative or legislation or anything governing that. It should be pretty simple. And I definitely think that it's more important to educate girls and prevent pregnancy in the first place, and women are not doing that, and I'm going to show that tonight. The other thing I need to do is what we usually do at the beginning of the show, and that's doing what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, many of which, by the way, lead to very heated arguments, and we don't even all always agree on that. Like, Karen and I are very vehemently disagree with each other on this topic of female sports. And although I think she would agree with me that it's not oppression of women that's the subject of the issue. It's really sportsmanship that's the subject of the issue. We just disagree maybe on how much competition between men and women in sports could be included in good sportsmanship. So that's
How do you feel about pregnancy tests? Sorry.
Pregnancy tests?
Doesn't matter. Sorry,
I think they should be pass-fail. Either you are pregnant or you're not. And nobody is ever just a little bit pregnant. Just now you have to figure out what movie that comes from. But in any case, so we dish out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions. We get censored for it. We get targeted for some pretty heated allegations of hate and anger and exploiting men and money badgers and all that other stuff for it. And we also get silenced occasionally in both our social media and our own website and everything. We've been DDoSed in the past. We've had all kinds of interesting issues. And if anybody's been following our recent shows on some 3-letter agencies in government, you'll notice that we have had a recent spate of unusual numbers and sizes of technical difficulties taking place during those shows.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, right? So as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. And we genuinely don't know how that's going to change, whether it's going to change, if it's going to improve, if it's going to get worse. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. If you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip, where we currently have two super chows. We have one from Critter at 1:30 p.m. today. Gave us $47 and said, happy to see Aiden, that would be Aiden Paladin, with you guys. Been following her too for a while on YouTube. Congrats on the new incoming president. Fight, fight, fight. And Meredith G gave us $5 at the beginning of the show and said, HBR Talk 331, honey for the Badgers. So those have been read, and anything that comes up after, I'm hoping that people will get a little heated about the subject matter as well. We'll keep on reading them throughout the show. As always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com. We have been DDoSed in the past, but we're still there. So there you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And I also have some super chows that I can't remember whether it was last week or the week before we failed to read some of our super chows. All of them were from Albert Nader Retro. All 3 of them were super chows. He gave us $5 to say. And I believe I read them on the after show, but I will also give these quotes because I think they're good quotes, and I think it's important that we read the super chows. So the first one, he says, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. The second one was, with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben Parker. And the third one is, whatever Russia does from now on is on the West, because we didn't stop them. You don't poke a bear, you shoot it. Albert Nader Retro. And I may have read those last week, but I still have them in a list of unread ones, so just in case, there they are. And thank you, Albert Nader Retro, for the super chat.
The prediction: the Trump administration will end war between Ukraine and Russia. And this will result in the mainstream media continuing to push the idea that Trump is a Russian shell. Because we don't want to end wars, after all. We want to keep them going forever. Don't we?
Yeah, according to feminists and the mainstream media, I hope the wars end because I don't want to see a bunch of men scooped up by our military and forced to go fight in another country against their will. I mean, if men believe in the cause involved, they can choose to enlist. And they shouldn't have to face the risk that they'll be forced to fight for something that doesn't have anything to do with them. But they do. So, I hope he ends the conflict. But with that, so I'm not going to start showing a bunch of the tweets and stuff that I've seen and posts on social media. What I'm going to get into is, we already know the allegation, and I kind of posted the allegation as in the low bar here. Post-election hysteria has started. Lamentations of feminist women who who claim women and girls will soon be dropping dead all over the United States from the mysterious patriarchy-inflicted malady of forced birth due to predicted Trump-mandated denial of women's medical or health care. We are told, and health care is in scare quotes there for a reason, we are told Trump voters are denying women therapeutic abortion in cases of medical need or when the pregnancy was caused by a criminal act. So that's what we're examining, that allegation. And I've already examined that allegation once. I looked into this a while back when a movie called Call Jane came out, and I watched a trailer for it. And so I have a video on this topic already on the channel. The title of the video, let me look up here because I can't remember. Are the allegations of patriarchal oppression in Call Jane true? And I'm going to skip most of my transcript here because it's really not, most of it's not important. But the story from this, it's a main character with a problem pregnancy with complications that, according to her doctor, have a 50% chance of killing her. A panel of male doctors votes to not allow the abortion. She sees a flyer for the Jane Collective, which was a real thing. It existed, bearing the film's title, Call Jane. And so for the rest of the trailer, it goes through like moments from the film showing her seeking out this abortion and the difficulties apparently that this collective had, right? So it makes it look like if abortion is restricted in any way, women are going to die, and it's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a frequent thing. So I went through and looked up information on how many abortions are actually life-saving procedures. So Anthony Huber, permanently retired skateboarder, asks the question: therapeutic abortion? And question mark, exclamation point, rinse, repeat. Which it does sound quite weird, right? Therapeutic abortion. What's therapeutic about killing your baby? So remember I mentioned the term self-defense. And my position on this is less broad than that of the government historically. I consider abortion to be a medical necessity in cases where a pregnancy is doomed. So the baby's not going to survive the pregnancy, and the complications of the pregnancy are causing the mother to be threatened along with the doomed pregnancy. And so she can't even carry to far enough for a premature birth without her life being threatened. That would make aborting in that situation a therapeutic abortion, in that it would reduce the number of deaths involved in that pregnancy from 2 to 1. And it's similar to if you have a set of Siamese twins. I know they don't call it that anymore. I can't think of, there's a term for when you are attached to somebody by your bodily tissue being the same tissue, and I can't think of the term. Conjoined twins. If it is in very rare instances, there's times when the way that they are conjoined is going to kill both of them, and there's a chance to save one. It's a horrible situation. It's a horrible choice for the parents and the doctors to have to make. And if they do make that choice and one survives, it reduces the number of deaths from 2 to 1. That's the only time, in my opinion, that it's actually therapeutic. I don't even think it's therapeutic in cases of abortion unless that condition is part of the situation. Or in cases of rape, I mean. Unless the death of the mother is imminent from the pregnancy. But in any case, so as you can see on the screen, let's look at how things really were. Right? According to the Chicago Tribune, this is supposed to have taken place in I think it's supposed to have taken place in Illinois. But, Illinois law criminalizing abortion passed in 1867 and maintained for 103 years. It carried an exception in cases of medical necessity, rather broad standard, right? Because medical necessity isn't just the mother's going to die. Doctors can determine medical necessity if it's not going to be healthy for the mother to give birth, right? So I found no mention of a legally mandated panel to determine the validity of women's need for therapeutic abortion. There wasn't anything barring a patient from obtaining a second opinion if she was not satisfied with her initial assessment. One particular facility in Chicago had its own panel to decide if its facility would do an abortion, but it didn't prevent a woman from going, say, to another facility in another area and getting it done. It didn't prevent women from getting a second opinion and going back and saying, this, my doctor says, right? So it wasn't illegal, and it was pretty consistent through various states that if the mother faced death from complications of pregnancy, the law allowed for her to terminate that pregnancy. Right? So the first thing is debunked, is that women needed abortion to be legalized because they were dying from quote-unquote forced birth when they were pregnant. Which I'm also going to debunk the forced birth label. But just to reiterate here, abortion law, as it stood before Roe v. Wade, did not prevent women whose pregnancies were threatening to kill them from getting abortions. Roe v. Wade did not save one single life of a woman whose reason for having an abortion was because if she tried to have the baby, she was going to die. Not one. So let's take a look at the next thing. Because we say the law didn't prevent women from having those abortions, right? So there's a portrayal of the organization as a savior of women doomed to die in childbirth without the benefit of abortion. In reality, that wasn't even their main business. The Jane Collective performed approximately 11,000 abortions in Chicago between 1969 and 1973. Excuse me, sorry guys. All of a sudden I'm trying to have the hiccups. But I don't know, is everybody able to still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I can. Yes.
Okay. So if we look at this, we think, wow. So between 1963 or 1969 and 1973, were 11,000 women's lives endangered by their pregnancies that couldn't get medical care, that couldn't get an abortion done in a hospital or some other medical facility where it was determined that their life was in danger from the pregnancy and they were aborting for medical reasons. Like that many in just Chicago alone. That many. That's really a suspicious number, in my opinion. It's like a really crazy statistic. So I went and I looked into it. Well, according to Public Health Effects of Legal Abortion in the United States by Sarah L. Tietze and Richard Lincoln, 2.61 abortions per 1,000 live births were performed on medical indications in 1967, or approximately 9,190 abortions based on the number of live births listed by infoplease.com for that year. And in 1968, that rose to 5.19 per 1,000 live births for a total of 18,000, a jump that can be attributed to some states expanding the concept of maternal health reasons to include the very, very easy to exploit category of mental health. So now we're looking at a rather large number of legal abortions. There were almost as many abortions performed legally in medical facilities in 1967 as the 3-year total for abortions done just in Chicago between 1969 and 1973 by this collective. Right? So we're looking at
Seems like a huge number for the time.
yeah, we're looking at here a rather large number. And then in the next year, it was more. There were more legal abortions performed for this issue, medical issues, right? Than there were done during that whole 3-year period in Chicago. Now, I will point out this other thing, right? Reasons for Having Abortions in the United States by William Robert Johnson determined that 98.3% of abortions are elective. 0.1% is done to prevent the death of the mother, and another 0.8% are done for other maternal health reasons, for a total of 0.9% being falling into the category of health reasons. So the overwhelming majority of abortion that these women are upset about, it's not about a life or death situation at all.
It's about convenience.
Right?
That's it. That is it.
Like, I get all kinds of reasons from women. I won't be able to go to college if I don't have this abortion. Right? Well, I won't be able to go to college. If I wanted to go to college right now, I couldn't go to college. I don't have the money for it. And I wouldn't be eligible for a lot of scholarships and grants because I'm middle-aged, not in school right now. A lot of them are for young people. And my grades in high school weren't great because my health sucked. And so I wasn't really eligible when I did go to college. And if that was going to keep me from going to college, because of financial reasons, the same reasons women cite for abortion, nobody anywhere would argue that should make it okay for me to go hunt down the people that beat me out in competition for any scholarships and grants and eliminate them so that I could have the money. Like, right. Nobody would argue that. Everybody could recognize that would be reprehensible behavior, and I should go to jail for it if I did it. Right? But if it's a baby, all of a sudden it's okay. It's going to cost me money to have this baby, so I'm going to kill it. Like, I don't get it. How can you differentiate like that? Right? So here we have this evidence that it's very, very rare for health reasons to be, among abortions that get done in the U.S., for health reasons to be the cause of an abortion, right? So the CDC starts tracking these numbers right after, I want to say 1970, 1969 or 1970. And so they showed, let's see, 12,000 women, 12,584 actually in 1969 were able to obtain legal abortions. 180,119 in 1970. 212,075 in 1971. And in 1972, 500,000. More than 500,000. The year I was born in 1972. So there were 500,000 babies aborted the year I was born.
God damn, that's just an astonishing number to think about.
Yep, 500,000 legal abortions. Roe v. Wade took effect in 1973. The year that it was in court in 1972. So the year Roe v. Wade was in court, arguing that women could not get legal abortions, 500,000 women got legal abortions.
They're taking my rights away. God.
Yep. Just want to point that out. Patriarchy, fuckface. In 1973, when the ruling legalized abortion, the total number was 615,831. Sorry. So another, basically, it's less than another 100,000. So we went from 86 to 115. That's our difference. And of course it went up for years after that. So let's take a look at if 0.9% of these abortions were done for maternal health reasons. That's a total of 5,281 in 1972, and 5,043 in 1973. So plenty of women who gave health reasons as their reasons for having abortions were able to get them during that time. And earlier, prior to those numbers, health reasons were the only legal reasons to have an abortion. And even more women had abortions with health reasons cited. So to attribute the 11,000 abortions done by the Jane Collective to life-threatening pregnancy complications, as Call Jane implied, was bullshit. We would have to assume that on average, when... Let's go back to the numbers here. When 9,000 abortions were being done in legally in 67, and 18,000 in 68, that somehow in the midst of those huge numbers that suddenly shrank after abortion just became legal for whatever reason. That over 2,000, almost 3,000 women a year with such complications would be denied care. Right? All those abortions for therapeutic reasons are getting done. It's perfectly legal. And yet somehow 3,000 women a year are told, no, but not for you. So why would they be singled out? Or maybe that's not the truth. Right? Maybe they lied about the reasons why women were seeking out the Jane Collective. And if you think that maybe doctors just, out of hand decided, no, we're gonna say no to these women, even though we're saying no at the risk of their lives, let's take a look at the legal environment in which they would be doing that, right? Because you'd have to think that the physicians at the time were just these angry, callous, domineering patriarchs that were willing to see these women die in their care in order to deny them this one particular medical procedure that was being so frequently done, despite being illegal unless you had a medical reason for it. So according to the article History of Medical Malpractice in the U.S., hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, I think the name is Chianese and Riley Law, the 1960s saw some of the highest medical malpractice awards payouts, creating an industry-threatening legal environment that led to malpractice reform, award caps, and the creation of doctrine of informed consent in medicine, which is, like, for instance, I'm a certified med passer, which means that when it's time for the people that I work with to take the medications that are prescribed for them by their doctors, I legally am capable of giving them those meds. I can get their pills out, and however the procedure is determined for that individual, I can do their med pass. It can be anything from handing them the pills and letting them take them to crushing them and putting them in a substance that's easy to swallow and giving them that substance with the medicines in it, however it's administered. I can administer meds. I can give shots. Probably suck at that because I haven't had to do it so far. But I could do all of that. If I had a resident that was on insulin, I could do their insulin shots. If I had a resident that used an inhaler, I would have to follow procedure for that. And part of the procedure is, let's say I was in charge of Lauren's care, and Lauren had a headache, and I was going to give Lauren an aspirin. I can't just get the bottle out and give Lauren an aspirin. I have to say, Lauren, this is your aspirin. This is, however many milligrams of aspirin she was prescribed for this. And this is for your headache. And then, however the procedure is, then I would have to give it. But Lauren has to tell me that she wants that medicine before I can give it to her, unless it's, prescribed. And then she still has to say okay and accept it before I can give it to her. That's the law. That law came from these malpractice reforms because medical mistakes happen sometimes when there's not enough communication between the provider and the patient. So I even have to do that when I'm dealing with patients, when I'm helping patients that don't necessarily have the full capacity to understand what I'm telling them about their meds unless I'm really basic in how I describe it. So for this is very basic stuff that today, but during that time period, that had to all be ironed out because there were the way that lawsuits were progressing in the medical field. It was very high risk for physicians and for institutions. Gabriel, Phila, and Lucas asks if the consent has to be enthusiastic. Well, we'll just say this. Only yes means yes. In that instance. If somebody doesn't say anything, or doesn't cooperate and is just non-responsive, and looks like a different than normal behavior toward the idea of getting their medicine, I have to work a little harder to make sure I know that they're okay with taking it. Right? There has to actually be a medical order to override their consent for me to not get consent. And this is true with everything that I do. And I have 3 weeks of education for this job specifically. I have other education for other things, obviously, but this job specifically, 3 weeks of education, a couple days a year of ongoing education to remind us of how to do certain things, and that's it. If I stop and on the side of the road because there's been a car accident and I see that somebody needs first aid, I have to get consent for that too. Unless they're unconscious and it looks like I'm gonna be letting them die if I don't do something, I have to get consent. So there you go. But yeah, so the doctrine of informed consent. You got to tell people what you're doing for them, what it's going to result in, what the risks are, and then get their consent before you actually perform the action. Some of the top payouts were related to medical errors affecting patient outcomes in infants during their birth. Sometimes even things that a doctor couldn't do anything about. Like there was a massive controversy over payouts for babies born with cerebral palsy that might have been genetic causes, or was caused by conditions during the pregnancy that the doctor had no way of being certain of or predicting. So the doctor couldn't have predicted that the baby would be born with the disability and couldn't have helped the mother prepare or given the mother any kind of information that would have made she could have discussed with the father and said, hey, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. We're going to get prepared this way or that way. There was no warning, right? And the doctor was found liable despite having no power to make a difference in the situation. So it was a very high-risk environment, and there were high malpractice awards given to doctors for adverse outcomes following childbirth. How many of those doctors do you think were going to risk a malpractice suit involving a wrongful, preventable death, knowing those facts, knowing that information during that time? So I declare the myth that women could not obtain therapeutic abortion before Roe versus Wade hereby debunked. Right. So from there, we get into, let's see, I want to get into just how high risk is mortality during pregnancy. So the CDC tracks this, and they've got two different ways that they talk about it. There's two different standards for reporting. One of them only goes like 42 days after the birth, and the other one goes a year after the birth. But the upshot, let's see if this is the right data, what I'm looking for. No, that's total deaths in the United States. So I am looking for provisional maternal deaths. There we go. And I believe I opened that. Nope, not there. Right. Provisional maternal mortality rates 12-month period ending June 2024. Right. Feminists really freaked out over legislation that was passed during the Trump administration and during the last few years by various states and everything. And so, based on what they said, one would have expected a major spike in 2023 and early 2024 in maternal deaths. But what do you guys see on the screen there? Like, you look at this. Here we have this spike here during the COVID crisis, and it went down, and it kept going down. So here's early 2020. Here's let's see if I can get that to stay popped up. Such a tiny little point at which it comes up. There we go. April 2019, total 17.7 per 100,000. Right? And we're looking at, and let's see if it'll give it to me again. There we go. Gosh, that's such a tiny point. I can't stay there. My hand's not that steady. Sorry, guys. But, alright. So, June 2023, 19.6 per 100,000. We're seeing it drop over this time period. Yep, 19.3, 19.0, 19.0, 18.7, 18.5. I think that's the lowest point, and then it sort of is bouncing back up here. So you're seeing, even though these laws go into effect, and we've seen the news reporting on this. Oh, there's this epidemic of women dying in childbirth because anti-abortion legislation. Patriarchy, oppression! Women are being killed by forced birth. Except they're not. Not in more numbers than prior to the COVID crisis. And this isn't for people who want to argue that these numbers are, from some MRA source. I just want to put it on the screen. CDC, National Center for Health Statistics. The people at Feminist tell us we have to trust. Right?
AKA the science.
The science. Duh, duh, duh. Right. Now, you get higher number if you use the other standard. This is within 42 days of termination of a pregnancy, irrespective of the duration and the site of the pregnancy, from any cause related to or aggravated by the pregnancy or its management, but not from accident or incidental cases. So this could include women who died because of complications of abortion. Because termination of the pregnancy, some pregnancies terminate in abortion and some in childbirth. Most in childbirth still, but an increasing number in abortion. And there are two types of abortion. There is medical abortion, or like the surgical and drug abortions that are inflicted on the unborn baby by a medical act. And then there's spontaneous abortion, which is what is a miscarriage known as, or what a miscarriage is known as. So all of those would be included. Miscarriages usually occur because something is wrong. Sometimes they occur due to injury during the pregnancy, but they usually occur because something is wrong. And if something is wrong, it can include problems with the mother's health, and so miscarriage can also include a fatal health reaction. For instance, my mom almost died during a miscarriage. She almost bled to death. She had injuries that occurred from other health conditions that basically caused the miscarriage, and the miscarriage caused hemorrhaging, and she actually lost a lot of blood and had to be sterilized after that so that it didn't happen again. But that was she got to have two babies first, so I have a brother, and then after that there were no more. So all of my other brothers were not biological. They just were guys that lived in the neighborhood and spent all of their time at our house. Because my parents were awesome. But so let's look at what's causing these. Because obviously, this forced birth issue, there has to be some basis for it, right? Even though we're talking tiny percentage of women that experience this, and a tiny percentage of abortions that are a result of this, like, feminists have to be panicking over something, right?
Of course, isn't that their natural state of being?
Yeah. So
I happen to have convened with the spirits at the end of the universe, and they have assured me that Spiratgan. So, what do you have to say about that, Hannah? Hey.
Oh, I'm floored.
Exactly.
Debunked. I've been debunked. So previously, my research into the pattern of maternal deaths has indicated that most maternal deaths are due to heart conditions and like cardiopulmonary or cardiovascular conditions. So either heart and lung conditions or heart and circulatory conditions. That a large number of them are related to obesity. And that's been consistent for decades. So previously I've always said the fat acceptance movement is more dangerous to women than pregnancy. Because feminists treat pregnancy like this high-risk activity. But now, last year, the number one cause of pregnancy-related death among women in the United States was mental health conditions. And I looked at that. When I saw this, I'm like, what the fuck? Because mental health conditions are not they're not terminal. It's not like cancer. It's not like any kind of, COVID killed you with pneumonia, and AIDS kills you by destroying your immune system, and then you often that kills you with the flu or pneumonia. There's all these illnesses that kill by shutting down your bodily functions and causing it to die, or interfering with your bodily functions and causing it to die, replacing healthy tissue with unhealthy tissue that then interrupts your bodily functions and causes your body to die. Mental health doesn't do that. Right? When people die from a mental health condition, it's usually by taking an action outside the medical condition that causes that death. Taking high-risk actions if the symptoms of the mental health condition are high-risk actions, high-risk behavior, or taking suicidal actions if the medical condition causes suicidal behavior. Well, that's preventable. If you know somebody is going through a mental health crisis, there is always the possibility to help. And if somebody is going through a mental health crisis, the pregnancy isn't the cause, and eliminating the pregnancy will not cure it. So this is incidental. It's not incidental as in it doesn't matter, but it's incidental as in the pregnancy is not the reason for this. Even if they're upset about the pregnancy and it exacerbates their condition. Meanwhile, there is a condition that pro-lifers have talked about for decades called post-abortion syndrome, which abortion advocates have denied for decades, while also admitting that a thing called postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis exist. And they can occur both after live birth and spontaneous abortion. Well, if spontaneous abortion can cause it due to changes in brain chemistry and any trauma that might be associated with the loss of the pregnancy, so can abortion. So can medical abortion, right? You can suffer from postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis as a result of the chemical changes in your body that take place because you were pregnant and now you're not. And you're not pregnant in the midst of the pregnancy when your body wasn't prepared for you to stop being pregnant in the moment. And then on top of that, for many women, this is a very weighty decision. It's not something that they feel good about. It's something that they do because they feel like they have to, or they think they have to. They think they don't have a better choice available to them. And whether they regret it or not, it can be just making that decision can cause unresolved trauma. So the claim that post-abortion syndrome doesn't exist is hereby debunked. And the claim that abortion is a prevention of the top cause of pregnancy-related death, also hereby debunked. Once you get below mental health conditions, hemorrhage, that's usually in conjunction with a miscarriage. It can happen for other reasons. If you have a particularly large baby, for instance, and you should have had a C-section and you don't, well, guess who the biggest opponent of C-sections has been? Now, take a wild guess. Think about whether it was politicians, medical doctors, school teachers, men's rights activists, maybe feminists. What do you guys think?
It was
It was feminists. Feminists claim feminists claim that male doctors subject women to unnecessary C-sections far too frequently. And so C-sections have gone down. And all of a sudden hemorrhage is the second leading cause of maternal death. Gee. I'm shocked. I'm just totally shocked, guys. A third leading cause, the first physical cause that may not be related at all to whether somebody needs a C-section or not and doesn't get one. Yeah, mod wives, somebody says here, name I can't read because it's in letters that I don't use. But yeah, no real Raven, by the way. The bikini industry does not oppose C-sections. There is actually a crossways cut that doesn't go up and down the belly that you can get if you are concerned about and there's this misinformation that's spread to a lot of women that if you want to give natural childbirth later, that cut is better. It's 6 to 1/2 dozen the other. It's not true that it's better. But in any case, yeah, no, midwives is the other correct answer. And a lot of midwives are feminist. A lot of people go into becoming a midwife or a doula because of feminist reasons. And they treat the medical industry as a patriarchal, male-run, male-dominated, anti-woman industry. And so therefore, everything that they have decided as a standard must be wrong and bad and anti-woman and all that jazz. Well, except for the fact that, women are bleeding to death now in childbirth or during miscarriages because they're so reticent to do C-sections. So then we have, let's scroll down here a little bit, cardiac and coronary conditions, cardiomyopathy, hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, which is high blood pressure that didn't exist in the particular woman prior to pregnancy, but is existent during the pregnancy. And then we have cerebrovascular accident, which is essentially a brain hemorrhage. Metabolic or endocrine conditions like diabetes. There's a particular event that is called gestational diabetes where you become diabetic specifically when you're pregnant. Pulmonary conditions, which is lung conditions. A lot of these are related to, being asthmatic is dangerous during pregnancy. I was a asthmatic pregnancy, and I will say, if your abdomen is half taken up by another living being, it reduces your lung capacity quite a bit. So that's fair, but that's all stuff that can be handled in an emergency room or in a hospital setting, giving birth in a hospital setting instead of giving birth in the home. And but these other things, a lot of these are disorders that are more likely to happen to a woman if she has a higher body fat level. They're more likely to happen to a woman if she's already got, on the border of metabolic disorders. Like, you're not diabetic, but maybe you're pre-diabetic. Like, you're to the point where your body is heading for diabetes and it's just a matter of time. You're a lot more likely to have these problems. So most of the things that are causes of maternal death are preventable or are not necessarily caused by the pregnancy. They're just happening in conjunction with the pregnancy. And mental health conditions, usually, that one, though, really struck me. Because, that many women are committing suicide? Well, so I start scrolling down and I look. Oh, wait. Mental health conditions, right here. See if I can... So where do we get, what do we get with these mental health conditions? Mental health conditions include deaths of suicide, overdose/poisoning related to substance use disorder, and other deaths determined by the MMRC to be related to a mental health condition, including substance use disorder. So they mentioned substance use disorder twice. How many of you guys are shocked beyond belief that one of the leading causes of death, the top cause of maternal death in the United States during an opioid crisis might be substance abuse.
I can barely contain my shit. It's all over me. I'm covered in my own shit, I tell you.
Yeah, like, what does this have to do with abortion? Do you cure somebody's opioid addiction by killing the baby? I mean, like, I would really be surprised.
I, for one, am golf clapping as hard as I can that RFK is now in charge of America's pharmaceutical industry, or at least he's able to point as many fingers as he can at the obvious perpetrators of all of this bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it's not just what's making Americans fat. It's what's making Americans all kinds of things, and not just Americans. It's trickling down into all the vassal states of America, and making us not just fat, but well, all the things you're talking about now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, the heart conditions, heart disease, is the leading cause of death in America, according to the CDC. And it has been for quite some time. It's sat at that spot for quite some time. Now, I'm going to point something out here in a minute that's going to shock the shit out of some people. But basically, cardiovascular disease that is preventable by getting in better shape and staying in better shape kills more Americans than any other medical cause after birth. Meredith G just gave us $5 and said, let's be honest, if you have a bunch of women who need some totems to push their abortion agenda, they will intentionally push bad practice so they can create these totems. Think about the fact that feminists wanted Plan B to be over-the-counter when it was very high risk for women to use after the 9th week of pregnancy, and even in that 9th week, which is why the FDA didn't approve it to be over-the-counter.
The same thing is going to happen 4 years from now when
yeah.
J.D. Vance is up for the presidency. They'll be saying the same shit. Like, J.D. Vance wants to take away our abortions. I know we said this about Trump 4 years ago, but the point is, it's now J.D. Vance who is taking away our right to abortion. And unlike whoever the fuck the Democrat nominee is going to be. Who's going to be the Democrat nominee 4 years from now?
You know, the Democrats, honestly, right now, they don't have anybody respectable.
No.
I can't, off the top of my head, there is not.
It's probably Gavin Newsom, right?
Yeah,
Maybe.
he's probably their most popular. They don't have somebody that the people of the United States are going to be looking at and going, gosh, you know, I really believe in that person. They don't have somebody that has a track record of success in their existing political office that is popular in the United States and has been popular in the United States. And even the few people that the Democrats might tap to run that are popular in the United States, one of them can't run for president and is a Republican right now. And you know,
Tulsi Gabbard.
No, she can run.
Who are you talking about?
Arnold Schwarzenegger. He used to be.
What?
He was
Really?
popular for a while. Oh yeah, no, he can't run. He's not a citizen by birth. He can be governor. He was the governor of California for a while. But he's, and I would say the Democrats might like him simply because he sort of took their side a lot when it came to the COVID crisis. He's an authoritarian, so he's kind of an establishment politician now. But like, he'd be somebody that if he switched parties and he could run, the Democrats might unite behind him. Now, the Republicans wouldn't, because they're all pissed at him. All right? Except the establishment ones. Right? The Uniparty would definitely like him. But he can't run for president. The other one is Tulsi Gabbard, and she's not a Democrat either. She's a libertarian. And I don't think she would give them the time of day. So, honestly, I don't think they have a snowball's chance in hell. Unless something dramatically changes in the next 4 years that would make people trust the Democrats again and distrust the anti-establishment wing of the Republican Party. I don't see the Democrats coming back from this for at least 8 years. And if the changes get made, has she just become a Republican? Well, that's good. It's interesting. Maybe she'll join that team. I would like to see the Republicans become more libertarian.
You got J.D. Vance for in 2018, 2028.
Yeah. Got J.D. Vance or Ramaswamy would be another one. I still really like him.
You've got all kinds of good Republicans. Yeah. Not a chance of any good.
Yeah.
So
by the way,
good.
the Schwarzenegger quote was not "fuck your freedoms," it was "screw your freedoms." He didn't have the balls to say "fuck." That kind of made me sad.
He could quite pronounce it.
Oh, he could pronounce it because he said it. He said it in other times, but yeah, there are people who want to run Gretchen Whitmer. I would love for Gretchen Whitmer to run.
Please, let me do my best John Oliver impression. Do it.
Yes.
Do it.
Because she has a vulnerability. The establishment tried to use her administration to frame a bunch of guys of a kidnapping plot. And we could talk about that the whole time she was running for office. I would love to see her run. We can eviscerate her. That'd be great. But in any case. So we look at this maternal death thing like that's a no-go again. Not that there are no maternal deaths, but clearly there's not an epidemic of maternal deaths, and further, there's even more not an epidemic of inevitable maternal deaths. So there's not really anything here for feminists to go on. So that's not where I wanted to go. But this number, all right. In 2023, a provisional total of 3,090,582 deaths occurred in the United States, according to the CDC. According to the Guttmacher Institute, a provisional number, because they're not 100% certain, so give or take a small amount. That's deaths overall, all right? 1,037,000 abortions occurred in the formal health care system in the United States in 2023. Right? So, 1 in 4 deaths in the United States in 2023 had being aborted as its cause. Being aborted was the cause of death. Now, let me point out, where is it? The CDC has a statistic on, there it is. The CDC calls heart disease the leading cause of death in the U.S. based on 680,909 deaths. All right. Just wanting to point out that's a pretty big difference there. 1,037,000 abortions versus 680,909 heart-related deaths. Which, again, the fat acceptance movement is exacerbating. Totally. We're talking, just this huge discrepancy. By far, by a third again as much, being aborted was the leading cause of death in the United States in 2023. I didn't go back and look at the time period during the COVID crisis, but abortion has been at about 500,000 or more annually in the United States for more than a decade. It's fluctuated, but it's pretty close to the leading cause of death, and it's definitely in the top 5 causes of death the whole time. If you consider the life of the unborn child, being aborted is one of the top causes of death in the United States for at least 10 years, if not longer.
Well, that's if you include those people as people.
Mm.
And I don't. And as such, I don't include black people as black people. Therefore, all the people that died in the city gangbang shootings as deaths, then either. 19-year-old black people being killed by other black people in gangbang shootings, then that doesn't count. So, yeah, I guess it is abortion. Oh shit! Never mind.
Even the gangbang shootings. Actually, criminal violence in the United States, we get. I'm gonna have to debunk that one too, because statistically, you have a better chance of you have a much better chance of having been aborted than you do of being a victim of violent crime. Oddly enough, I personally don't fit that statistic very well because I was not aborted, and I've been a victim of multiple violent crimes, so like they like me. But yeah.
Well, you say that, but it's true. So fuck you.
Yeah.
Rah!
At least a victim of fatal violent crime. To this day, I have not been a victim of fatal violent crime. Potentially fatal at the time, but not actually fatal as an outcome. Thank goodness, because that would suck. But let's talk about, well, they use the term forced pregnancy to describe the situation. So, we have to tolerate these million abortions because what else are women going to do? They have to have abortions. They have to be able to be free to have an abortion because they might get denied the right to an abortion when their health is in danger and their lives are in danger and so on. And there's just no way to avoid getting pregnant. They just don't. There's nothing these women can do. It just
hell
them
have I
out of the
been
blue.
doing? What have I been doing for the past 46 years? Not getting pregnant?
Oh no, Lauren, that's not real. It doesn't. You don't count. You don't represent any women because you don't fit the narrative. So now we're going to start looking at some statistics on contraception use. And the first thing I'm going to throw up in people's faces, because we always hear about how necessary abortion is because contraception fails. And it's not the failure of the user, it's the failure of the contraception. Except I looked into that. Now that we've debunked rarity, now that we've debunked medical necessity for the most part, that most abortions are elective, now that we've debunked the epidemic of unavoidable life-threatening issues with pregnancy, we're just about to debunk the idea that despite being completely careful, these women end up in this situation. And it's forced pregnancy and forced birth. Contraception actually works. Guttmacher Institute, again, here. This is...
Guttmacher?
Yep, Guttmacher. That's their name. That's the last name here. Let me see if I have the top of the page here somewhere. I might not. I don't. All right, but this is. Let me duplicate this tab. There we go. Duplicate this tab. And we'll go to the top of the page so you can see. But while that's loading up, we'll look at the statistic. Modern contraception works. It says the 2/3 of U.S. women at risk of unintended pregnancy who practice contraception consistently and correctly account for only 5% of unintended pregnancies. So women who use contraception consistently and correctly aren't the ones getting pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant. And before anybody's like, oh, you're slut-shaming other women. No, I'm in that number. I wanted to not be pregnant for about another 4 years when I conceived my son with my husband. I wanted him to be about 4 years younger than he is, and have some things ready and done before we made him, so that we would be able to give him the best start. And I fucked that up. Like, that wasn't anybody else's fault but mine. I'm the one with the uterus. I didn't do everything I needed to do properly and carefully to make sure that the outcome I wanted was what happened. And it cost us a lot. It resulted in a lot of hardship for the whole family. And, I've had to contend with that. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about this, because I don't want other families to have that experience. I don't want other kids to be in that situation. And I don't want other women to have that regret in their lives. Like, there are things that we could have done for all 3 of our children that we didn't get to do because I fucked that up. So, either you're smart enough to learn that lesson, and you're smart enough to realize that, hey, that was stupid, and it shouldn't happen again, and you shouldn't encourage other women to fuck up the start of their children's lives that way either. Or you make excuses, which is what feminists have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so you look at the statistic here. What are we seeing here? Unintended pregnancies, 3.1 million. 5% of them happen with consistent use. 41% happen with inconsistent use, which was my issue. My use was inconsistent and incorrect. I made mistakes that were things that you should not be unaware of. I was unaware of things that you should not be unaware of. When you take a medication, you ask questions of your pharmacist. You learn about side effects. You learn about contraindications. You learn about, well, the most obvious was when you take a pill that's supposed to be in your system all the time, you want the medication to be at a consistent level in your system. You don't take it at 7 o'clock in the morning one day and 7 o'clock in the evening the next. You take it the same time of day every day. So there were a bunch of things that I fucked up there. And the biggest one was, if you're really trying to prevent pregnancy, you don't rely on just one form of birth control. You use at least 2. So...
Hi, Raven. I was an unwanted pregnancy too.
He
Many
wasn't
of us
unwanted. He wasn't unwanted.
Unplanned, sorry.
Yeah, unplanned. He wasn't even unplanned. I knew when I was 6 years old that I wanted to be a mommy, and I wanted a son. What happened with me was that I failed at ensuring that I created the conditions that I wanted to bring him into first. What was unwanted was the circumstances. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Me too. I was an unplanned pregnancy too. Many of us were. It's amazing how many awesome people came into the world accidentally.
Yeah, and we had that discussion because I didn't want him to think that he was unwanted. I don't want any kid to think that, Besides, he was born years and years and years after Roe v. Wade. And he was born to a mom who could have gone out and eliminated him before he was born. Every child born into the world after Roe v. Wade can take solace in the fact that they were at least wanted enough that their mother did not kill them before they were born. At least in the United States. So yeah, 41% of unintended pregnancies happen because people fuck up their birth control. And then 54%, so more than half of unwanted pregnancies, unintended pregnancies, occur because no birth control was being used at all. So when we hear like the whole forced pregnancy thing, there's a bit of an issue with the claim that the cause is not the woman's fault, and it's imposed on her against her will, and it's something that the patriarchy has imposed. It's oppression. She's pregnant through no fault of her own.
It's bullshit.
The knock-up fairy got her.
It's complete bullshit. It's complete and utter bullshit. It's just we allow these women to get away with this shit because you can't blame the woman. Oh my gosh, she's just an innocent victim in all of this shit. It's nothing. She didn't do anything. She was just boop. Oh my god, I'm pregnant. That's not how the fuck it works. You know what I mean? An unintended pregnancy is still the fault of the woman. I'm sorry. There's no other way to put that. Okay, there's no other way to say it. But we can't do that. Women are beyond reproach when it comes to holding them accountable for anything.
Yeah, it's insane. I've had arguments with women on X that have argued as if expecting a woman to take the control that women have demanded that they're given of their own bodies and use it to prevent pregnancy instead of having an abortion, that it's misogynistic to expect women to exercise that control. I've actually had it argued to me that women should be completely exempt from criticism for any and all behavior that leads to conception of a child and then choosing to have an abortion, despite the fact that they have all these different methods of birth control available. Like, a lot of this information that came out, there was less birth control available at that time than there is today. But this is more recent. So this and the pill is the one that is the most relied upon, right? And it's the one that's the most poorly used. But and this, let's see, okay, that's the one that I opened, I think. So you can see where this comes from. Guttmacher Institute right there. You can see contraceptive use in the United States. This is the numbers that they're looking at here. 61 million women at the time in their childbearing years, age 15 to 44, which that's a conservative estimate. Women's childbearing years, I was capable of getting pregnant at the age of 14, and I was a late bloomer. I have known people who got pregnant younger than that. And one of the instances that is used by feminists in the argument for unrestricted abortion was a 10-year-old rape victim in Ohio that was pregnant, that became pregnant as a result of the rape. And they stopped talking about it when they discovered that she was an undocumented immigrant and the rapist was another undocumented immigrant. The situation was essentially manufactured by bad policy. They couldn't find a kid in the United States that was a resident from birth, living with parents that were residents from birth. They couldn't find a functional situation that people couldn't say, well, if you don't allow these things to happen, that won't happen. So they shut up about it, but it is possible. I had classmates that had to go on medication in elementary school because they started puberty early, and they wanted to delay it for a couple of years so that they could finish being little girls before they had to be women. It's uncomfortable to be wearing a bra in the second grade, and so most women, most girls are capable of conception by the time they're 15. And most women are capable of conception through the age of 44. I'm still currently capable of conception if I wanted to, which would be a really dumb idea right now, and I'm not going to do it, but it could happen if I let it. So this is basically 70% of women are at risk of unintended pregnancy if they don't take active measures to prevent it. And that is, like I said, we're looking at Guttmacher Institute. They're fairly well known, and that was published in October 2015. So this is about 10 years old. So there's a couple of things that I don't remember if the female condom was available in 2015 or not, but there's a couple of things that are more commonly available now, like post-conception prevention of implantation. Methods that prevent implantation are more available now than they were. So what women are relying on specifically may have changed. But at the time that this was published, let's see, we already looked at that, so let's look at some 5.7 million women out of that number rely solely on the male condom. So they're not using any birth control of their own. They're just expecting the guy to use birth control. Now, frankly, for guys, that's all you got right now. That's going to change. But if you want to not get any of the preventable sexually transmitted infections that are bloodborne, that can be prevented by barrier methods, the only thing that you have that works for that is a condom. Nothing she can use will protect you, except maybe the female condom, and to be blunt, they still suck. They're not great. They're still better than, being stupid. But Richard Bier imagines me with 19 kids. If I had 19 kids, I would be running my own homeschooling business. You can bet.
She'd be the little old lady that lived in a shoe.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Had so many kids.
I wouldn't
didn't know what to do.
As long as we had the finances to support them, I wouldn't have minded that. I always wanted to have kids.
This is one of the many reasons I don't want kids, because we would have to homeschool them, and it's helpful that I never wanted to have kids in the first place. But if we did have kids, we would have no choice but to homeschool them, because God knows I wouldn't send my children anywhere near a public school.
No,
not with the rate at which
we would have no choice but to homeschool them,
them.
and I couldn't handle that.
Yeah. So the other thing is, male condom use has been significantly increased. It was only like about half the time in 1982, and by 2006 to 2010, 93%. Dual method, meaning using more than one method of birth control, which is what everybody should be doing. right? Because women who are sexually active should be declining to consent unless the guy wears a condom. And then they should also be using something of their own, whether it's birth control pills, gel, film, the sponge. It doesn't matter. Something that if a few stray semen get through, little swimmers get through the condom, few sperm, that it'll kill it or stop it. Like that's the smart thing to do. In fact, women have the capability, if they want to, of using two. You could be on a pill and still use a sponge, and they don't interfere with each other or mess anything up. Or contraceptive film is another one. Contraceptive foam. They have spermicidal lubrication. Some women use an IUD with hormonal birth control in it. An IUD is, in my opinion, an abortifacient, not just birth control. But I mean, there's lots of different ways to, like, if the sperm escape the condom, prevent them from getting anywhere, doing anything, surviving the journey, etc. But this is an interesting one. The proportion of all sexually experienced women who have ever used withdrawal has increased from 20%, 25% in 1982 to 60% in 2006 to 2010. That's the pull-out method. There are problems with that if it's the sole method that you're using. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yet it's still on Planned Parenthood's website. It's still listed as a form of birth control.
Yeah,
the pull-out method, which is just ridiculous.
Reduces the chance of pregnancy significantly, because oxygen is not good for sperm. But it doesn't eliminate it. And that's the thing. You want elimination. If you don't want to go through the experience of having to decide what you're going to do about being pregnant when you're not ready, you don't want just a reduction in chance. You want to statistically eliminate the chance of being pregnant altogether, right? If you're a smart woman, anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we already know that they're.
Yeah.
These women out here today, you can hardly accuse them of being too intelligent, especially if you're going to base it off the choices that they make, because it's just the math ain't mathin'.
I have to wonder if the rise of autism is anything relating to the result of so many parents put their children in front of screens to just watch fucking Peppa Pig or whatever, and they just leave the screens to educate their children, and then they wonder why they become autistic later. And I'm not having a go, but maybe that's the easiest way to raise children these days. But maybe it's nothing to do with vaccines, and I'm not talking about those gene therapy injections that aren't vaccines. I'm talking about,
Well, the connection, the MMR vaccine connection that was alleged by, God, I can't think of his name now.
Andrew Wakefield?
Yeah, by Wakefield. That was debunked. That's been debunked for decades.
Yes.
But one thing that you have a really serious point on is not just in preventing the manifestation of autism, because autism, there are genetic markers for autism. So the predisposition to develop autism is genetic. And then there are environmental factors that can take place during the pregnancy that can increase the risk that you're going to develop autism. But, the same thing is true with some other neuroatypical conditions, so autism isn't alone in that. But engagement, like social engagement during early childhood, makes a big difference in the development of autism in a child, in that the child might have a predisposition but might not develop the condition. Or if the child does develop the condition, like with me, it's so masked that you wait until you're 52 years old to get diagnosed, which is what happened with me. Like my parents were school teachers, so there was quite a bit of social engagement there. And then my grandfather also had a very specific philosophy about social engagement, the importance of social engagement. And my grandparents worked with infants with intellectual and physical disabilities on a severe and profound level. And so they actually had a great deal of experience in helping children to reach children who were going to die by the time they were like 2 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, still reach their full potential in life, even if their potential was tiny. And
having autistic parents isn't necessarily a predictor of having autistic children.
no,
It's a bit
that's
like
not what I'm talking about.
It's a bit like if your parents are smokers, you're less likely to be a smoker. These things sort of skip generations.
Well, I'm actually, I can go back and both of my parents, I don't know which one the gene came from, but there are traits that both of them had that could have been diagnosable. So it's distinctly possible. But I mean, I'm a nerd. I was raised by nerds who were raised by nerds. My family history is peppered with engineers. It's not shocking to have autism as an outcome. So I'm not going to say that any of that is necessarily predictable factors. But what my grandfather figured out was not permitting a child to disengage entirely. Demonstrating to the child that there is comfort and emotional intimacy and security and camaraderie and engagement with the people around him or her is very important in the prevention of like the worst outcomes in a kid that might be autistic. So when I was little, when I was a baby actually, like if you picked me up, I threw a temper tantrum. I had meltdowns over being subjected to any human engagement of any kind at all. I didn't like it. And my grandpa sat down with me and just sang to me until I figured out that I liked being sung to. And he was my favorite person his whole life after that. Very, very sweet and very, very kind and loving man when it came to little kids. He had some demons that he had to deal with in his life that made him difficult for other adults to handle. And it was difficult to watch that as I transitioned from childhood to adolescence to adulthood and became more aware of it. But I never ever changed that. Like Grandpa was always my favorite person in the whole world. And so that was, one of those things. Daddy's girl, Grandpa's girl. And my dad, when he realized the benefit that I was getting from the music, he kind of made music an everyday thing for me. And I think that's a huge portion of why I personally was able to mask so well that I didn't get a diagnosis till I was 52 years old. That was that, my dad, my mom, my grandpa, my grandma, they put a lot of effort into drawing me into social engagement with at least the family. I wouldn't be able to do any of the things that I do now publicly without that. It's vital that kids have that. So the whole, plopping a kid down in front of a screen and ignoring them, like, Mike isn't in any way off base with that. You really can't just raise your kids in front of the TV. And it's not the same, by the way, plopping your kids in front of the TV and walking away, as it is like you guys enjoy a show together. I used to watch MASH with my dad, WKRP in Cincinnati, Hogan's Heroes, and stuff like that. And, you know, we'd laugh together at the humor, talk about stuff. If something made me cry, you know, I got hugged. Like, there was none of that. You're just sitting in front of the TV watching TV. And there was a limit to how much TV time I had. And my brother was the same way, although he kind of limited that by wanting to be outside all the time. And you just couldn't take the kind of TV we had. It's like the size of a deep freezer. You know, our old TVs, like, take up, you know, half the space in the living. They were like half the size of your couch. And the speakers were built in, and you had to actually walk up to it to change the channels and shit, because I'm old. But yeah, it's vital that parents engage, interact consistently with their kids. You know, and I took that into my child rearing too. If the kids had a question about something and I didn't know the answer, it wasn't like, well, I don't know. Well, let's find out. Let's see what we can look up. And it was nice when, you know, the internet became a viable tool for that. But we spent a lot of time at the library. So, yeah, it's important. Did I hear somebody starting to speak in the background?
I did turn my thing on. I was waiting for you to finish speaking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, speak up.
Go on. No, yeah, I visited my little nephews in Scotland recently. That's why I was not here for a couple of weeks. My little nephew Sam, I bought him a foot keyboard that was designed especially for kids to stamp on and make music, and I think he's finally getting it. But my sister, since Sam had twin boys after that as well, and I've since only interacted with them as babies, and I only spent a few seconds with them up in Scotland recently, and as soon as I came in, one of them started crying, and I was warned of this. That whenever they encounter people they don't know, particularly men they don't know, I don't know if that's an important distinction or what, but when they encounter men they don't know, they start crying. And sure enough, when I came into the room, one of them started crying. And I was like, all right, okay, should we go? Yeah, and then we went. Like, because I came up because I wanted to help. I wanted to help. I not just wanted to help my parents build their new house because they recently moved up there to be with their grandchildren. I also wanted to help sort of look after my nephews and such. But I came to the conclusion that like if as soon as I come into the room they start crying because they're seeing a man they don't know, I'm like, I can't. Maybe I should wait a couple of years before they grow out of because they're at that point where if they see a man they don't know, it just distresses them, and I'm like, well, I just want to help, and if my presence does nothing but make them cry, then that's not helping. That's doing the exact opposite of helping, and I'm here sort of thinking, well, all right, I'm going to wait a few years until they grow out of this stage, because eventually they will grow out of this stage, and then they'll become people who can recognize their cool uncle.
Yeah,
as not just someone who makes them cry because I'm weird, but someone who can help them get into drugs and stuff. They'll do that eventually. One of these days. They'll be old enough that I can be like cool Uncle Mike who gets them into drinking and smoking and stuff, and it's gonna take 15 years or so. So I'm like, all right. I'm just going to avoid them for 15 years or so.
Well, the fun thing is to get them into music.
I've tried my best to do that with Sam, because he was the first. He was the opening one, and I did that by buying him gifts that might encourage his musicality, and apparently that worked. But then they had twins on top of Sam. Danny and Nick are their names, and now it's got a whole bunch more complicated, which is good because now I've got 3 nephews. Now I've got this big ass family that's going to grow into a bunch of strapping boys. But
are they identical twins?
They are. Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
See, now the fun in that is teaching them to play tricks on people. Because there are a whole range of tricks that identical twins can play on people that nobody else can do. So
they're gonna pull those tricks on me. That's the problem.
yeah.
They have birthmarks. I need to figure out how the fuck those birthmarks work.
You just got to teach them to be nice about it, be ethical about it. Like, do things that are fun and funny that people laugh at later, but not anything that is going to put anybody in danger or take away anybody's rights or anything like that, right? But Richard Beer asks, when my coworkers insist on speaking in word salad, how can I be sure about being autistic? So I'm going to recommend that you look up and read an article I wrote at the onset of the Gamergate controversy on Twitter. I think it was titled "Journalism as a Social Justice War Game," which that was my first. I think it's my first article on the Honey Badger Brigade blog. And that should be searchable. But in that, I describe the kind of person I am socially, and that might give you a clue as to why. My parents suspected it when I was 4, but when I was 4, they were looking for a much more dramatic symptom set, and I didn't have that. So I got the doctor just was like, oh yeah, she'll just catch up with her peers later. She's just behind socially, and she's developing intellectually first, and then she'll develop socially, which was commonly believed to be a regular thing that happens with girls, but actually that's a symptom of autism. So that's basically where my suspicions started there. And when you hear me tell the stories about my coworkers and everything, you got to remember I'm the person telling the story, so what you're getting is my perception of the events. So it's distinctly possible that what I'm describing is a wrong interpretation based on being autistic. Richard Beer also gave us $5 and asked, have you noticed how Harris sounds so much like that TikTok creator Mrs. Frazzle, who was offering those gentle parenting tips on how to communicate with adult family members? Imagine other world leaders being negotiated with in such a condescending manner. So I'm not really familiar with the TikTok creator, but what I have noticed is that she sounds like a kindergarten teacher talking to a room full of kindergartners when she's talking to adults. Like, that bothers me.
But we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, we don't really. I don't think we should ever.
She's going to disappear into obscurity.
I really don't think we should ever have to hear from her again, because she really should drop out of politics after this. At least, if she cares at all about having any, even the smallest modicum of dignity left. Because right now, if she has any left, going into another political battle is going to destroy that really fast.
I mean, she raised $1 billion in her campaign trail. And there's no way any of that went into anything other than her own coffers. So, fuck off, Kamala. You've got
I
$1 billion
certainly
in the
wonder.
bank.
Yeah, I certainly wonder because, like, obviously they have to attribute or account for that money, in taxes and so on. Like, there's a couple ways they have to be able to account for that money, so we can find out if she misused it. But there's some leeway there, so it's quite possible that you're correct in that. But anyway, but back to the subject matter here. So what we're looking at is we've debunked the idea that women are getting pregnant through no fault of their own. So we start out, we debunk the idea that women were denied therapeutic abortion under pre-Roe v. Wade law. We've debunked the idea that there's an epidemic of need for therapeutic abortion. We've debunked the idea that most abortion is therapeutic abortion. And we have debunked the idea that most abortion that happens because birth control failed. Right? Most abortion that happens because women didn't use any birth control at all. So that's quite a bit there. And we will say here about half of U.S. This is 2018, January 11, 2018. About half of U.S. abortion patients report using contraception in the months that they became pregnant, which means about half reported that they didn't use contraception in the month that they became pregnant. And from what we saw before, those reporting that they did use contraception weren't using it consistently or correctly. Then we have this one. Reported contraceptive use among U.S. abortion patients in 2000 and 2014. And same thing. The results. Slightly more than half reported that they had used a contraceptive method in the month they became pregnant. So this is consistent. That was 2018. This is 2014 and 2000. So for 20 years, 20 plus years, there's been a consistent pattern. About half of aborted pregnancies are done on women who didn't use birth control. About half the time, these women who are claiming that abortion is necessary because they're forced to be pregnant if abortion isn't available are actually getting pregnant because they chose to allow pregnancy to happen. Like, if you don't use any birth control and you get pregnant, it's no different than trying to get pregnant. Because the only thing that people do when they're trying to get pregnant is have sex without birth control. They might try to time it. They might put effort into timing it during ovulation. That's the only difference. So we can close those because that's really all I wanted to point out on those. These links, by the way, are all in the low bar, so you can read the whole article for any of these. This one is 2008, 2012, 2014. National Survey of Family Growth. Again, contraceptive method use in the United States, trends and characteristics during that time. All right. So women who were using birth control, let's see, 6% were using a long-term, long-acting, reversible contraceptive, so like an IUD, and an implant. So there's a thing called Norplant. I don't remember what it was called before it was Norplant, but it's like birth control pill medication. It's implanted under the skin and it's slow release, and it lasts for I think 3 years. That gets used by a lot. So between 6 and 14% using that. Sterilization dropped among women during that time, right? But a lot of different types of contraception are used by women, and a lot are available. Only half women during that time using any form at all. 60% of those at risk of unintended pregnancy. That's not going to show for me for some reason. Let's try... There we go. All right. So go back to 2000 and 2001 here. 46% of women had not used a contraceptive method in the month they had conceived. So it's consistent, very consistent. Those that did relied more heavily on the male condom. In other words, the ones of the ones that claimed that they were using birth control, the majority of them were citing the guy's use of birth control as their birth control. And then, you go on down from there, the pill, the other different available types of birth control. 42% of condom users cited condom breakage or slippage as a reason for pregnancy. So just pointing that out. So women should know better than to just rely on a condom. And then we get into methods here, which we can go through. And in 2018, this is the most recent, I think, information, about 1 in 5 contraceptive users age 15 to 49 relied on methods used at the time of intercourse, such as condoms, withdrawal, emergency contraception, and natural family planning methods, meaning rhythm, which there's an old joke about the rhythm method. What do you call people that use the rhythm method? And of course the answer is parents. But quite a bit of consistent birth control use. Permanent female method, meaning tubes tied, is one of the highest ones. The pill, one of the highest ones. The third place, male birth control. So an awful lot of women rely on, like we're looking here, male condom. 6,125,842 women relied on their partner to use a condom for their only form of birth control. So what does that say to us? Guys, if you are sexually active with women, if you're dating, you're not married, and you don't want to conceive a child, or if you're in a marriage and you don't want to become parents, is your wife relying on you as the sole responsible party for birth control, or is she on the pill? Maybe using, birth control film or a sponge or something along those lines. Is she relying on condom use but still making you pull out? These kinds of things. If that's the case, then there's a thing that is coming up next year. Not next year, but the year after. And it's like, I'm already thinking of 2025 because it's almost 2025 now. But, let's see, where is the page here? Yeah, there we go. This is what I'm looking for. So, we've been talking about this for years. Vasogel male contraceptive. The initial researcher on this was called the Parsons Foundation. This has been available, by the way, in India for years under the name Rysug. But in the United States, it has not been available. But that's going to change. So this company that is partnering with the Parsons Foundation to create the drug and market it, they're expecting, it's going to be called Plan A, but they're expecting to launch the product in 2026. Right? So you're looking at an environment right now, today, in which about half of abortions are done on women who didn't use birth control. Among the women who did use birth control, hundreds of thousands of them are women who claim they used birth control, but really they were just citing the guy's use of birth control as their use of birth control. And they got pregnant because something went wrong with the condom. Guys, you cannot trust her. If you don't want to be a father, you cannot trust her to cooperate. Even if she doesn't engage in deliberate birth control sabotage, where she tricks you into fatherhood on purpose, even if she's not engaging in sperm jacking, she can want to not be a mom. She can be the woman who's going to have an abortion if she gets pregnant. And she still will take no active measure. She will rely solely on you to be responsible for preventing the pregnancy. When this stuff comes out, I hope every guy who wants to control the timing of the start of his children's lives, or who just doesn't want to be a father, invests in it. And I mean in the use of it. Because this stuff works for 10 years. It is easily reversible. It is safe. It has basically been tested in India by the fact that it's been on the market all that time. Right? You cannot rely on women to take responsibility for their reproductive choices. It's an unfortunate fact. And because of that, your best bet, your smartest choice, is to just not leave it up to her. Don't give her the choice. Don't give her the choice to be careless with your sperm. Don't give it to her at all. Kill it on the way out until you're ready to be a dad. If you're going to engage in dating and sexual practices with women, you have no excuse to not do this. Right? That's my take on it. You know. And yeah, Mangaka points out the smartest choice is you just get a doll and cut women out of the situation altogether. I would say, and I'm going to say this to both sexes, right? Your body count is very important. It matters quite a bit. There are other things that we can talk about with regard to sexual activity and brain chemistry and what it does to you when you make an intimate connection with somebody and they then leave at some point, or you lose the ability to trust them or desire to remain intimate with them and you leave. There are things that happen with you that are actually unhealthy and damaging. Sleeping around isn't a smart choice for either sex. And right now, under the current legal circumstances, getting married doesn't have any legal benefits for men. There's no protection offered to you by being married. And so there's not, like if you're gonna be in relationships with women, it's not advisable to begin with. But if you're gonna do it anyway, it's not advisable necessarily to make a family with them. And even if you're gonna do that, you can't trust that being married is going to make that permanent. So when you consider dating, if you're going to consider dating, and you consider marriage, and all that, it's best, your best bet, personally, is to not have a bunch of broken connections behind you. And to not trust a woman that has broken connections behind her. And ladies, it's fair for a guy to consider your body count a reason why he doesn't want you raising his children. If you can't be relied on to commit and stay committed in a relationship and to protect your fertility against the possibility of bringing a child into less than the best circumstances that you can provide, then why would he trust you to be the best that you can be at taking care of the child when he's sick, taking care of the child when his behavior is not ideal, taking care of the child maybe if the child is born with a disability, teaching the child morality and ethics, and helping the child develop as he grows. If you're not grown up enough to do that, why would a guy trust you? And, I don't think that I would if I was a guy. And honestly, like the girl I was when I graduated high school and was dating, I wouldn't trust that girl. And I think I was better suited than a lot of gals I knew. Like, not a lot of gals that I grew up with, because I grew up in a community where family values was pretty high. And it was unusual. It was kind of shameful to sleep around and stuff like that, right? But I was still an immature little brat at 18 years old by my today's standards. Like, why would guys trust you if you can't be better than that? So, and if you're under 25 years old, you shouldn't even be thinking about getting married right now. Like, I wouldn't be thinking about it if I was a guy at all. But, at least wait till your brain has stopped developing. It's completely, fully reached adulthood. And hers, too. Because, you really can't trust somebody that's going to change that much. So,
I mean, for the longest part of history, your brain was already developed enough to be married by the age of 15. And that's not, I'm not saying that's how it should be nowadays, but it was how it was in the old days. I'm just pointing out that people's childhood has been extended long into their late 20s. Yep. To a degree that's not necessarily natural. If you are someone who fell in love with their childhood sweetheart at the age of 15, and then you developed a perfectly functional relationship to the point that you could start raising children by the age of 20, then God bless you. Like, you're a rarity nowadays.
Yeah.
But if you are that thing, then by all means, please do that. Please do start raising children, and by your early 20s, God knows that's what my parents did.
Yeah, but
they started raising children by their early 20s.
What has changed?
By all accounts, it went quite well, but that is no longer the case.
Yeah, what has changed is what people face growing up. Like, my generation is making a big deal about the fact that we were the last generation of kids to play outside and be creative and be either unsupervised or loosely supervised by parents and so on, which isn't universally true. Like, that there are kids in my neighborhood that run around unsupervised all the time, so that's not necessarily that issue is not necessarily true. But as you go back generation to generation, for somebody to survive to adulthood and reproduce, they had to be smart enough to avoid or overcome, confront, and deal with, navigate, whatever you want to say, as an increasingly broader and broader spectrum as you go back in history of threats to their safety and circumstances that if they screw them up could become life-threatening. And so you had people matured differently, right? But the brain didn't reach its full development until 25 during that whole time. It's a growth factor. People got married during their early adolescence, and they had the emotional maturity and the intellectual capability of handling what was expected of a young married couple at that time. But at that time, they had a support network of their entire extended family. So what's different today? First of all, most people don't confront the same level of demands on their intellectual capacity growing up in terms of problem solving, wise choices, and so on, because they're more supervised, and they're increasingly more supervised with every generation. But the other thing is, many people do not have that support network. They move away from their families. They become estranged. They rely increasingly on the government. They don't necessarily partner up to raise their children. There are a lot of children raised in man deserts where there's single moms everywhere but not a dad anywhere. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to finish up with talking about this particular form of male birth control. Because honestly, guys, like, women have had 100 years of birth control development, increasingly broad spectrum of available types of birth control, increasingly broad availability of each of those types, where, you don't just have to go to a specialized place to get it. You can get it at the grocery store. You can get it in a convenience store at a gas station. There's a lot of places that sell certain types of birth control that are just for women. And then on top of that, it's become increasingly cheaper. Like, you can get birth control pills for less than you spend on Starbucks every month or whatever people buy. I like to make my coffee at home, so it's a bad comparison for me, but I hear that a lot of women are really into they gotta have their Starbucks or they gotta have their gas station coffee. Like, it's cheaper than gas station coffee to get birth control pills. Right? It's cheaper than gas station coffee to prevent pregnancy. And they have fucked it up. They have killed 1 million babies last year because more than half of the women who didn't want to get pregnant that didn't bother using birth control.
Those of us who grew up in Gen X, or indeed the cusp of Gen X, we would read Calvin and Hobbes, and we would understand everything about Calvin and Hobbes, about how you used to just run off into the woods with your pet stuffed tiger and just invent all of these amazing games, and it was and it was amazing. But this is the cultural gap between Gen X and millennial. That millennials don't have their Hobbes. They don't have the companion that they can take with them into the wilderness and play Calvin ball.
Yeah.
They don't understand all of the amazing games that Calvin played, because they've grown up with feminist parents who wouldn't let them go out into the woods and play Calvin ball with their favorite stuffed animal. Pardon me, I'm trying not to cry. I think I've said my thing. We are 2 generations in to the kids who don't have their hobs, to the kids who didn't get to be raised by wolves, the kids who didn't get to go out into the wilderness and just play. They don't know what playing is. All they know is this woke bullshit.
There's going to be a big division there among millennials, and a bigger division among Zoomers between kids whose... There's 2 types of parents in Gen X, and they would have inspired a couple of different types of parents in millennials, and those types are parents who I would call them helicopter parents. Like, I don't know what you would call, whether it's attachment parenting or whatever, but basically your kid doesn't get any alone time. Your kid is constantly supervised. Your kid is constantly... Everything they do is directed. They're not making up their own games. They're not fighting with other kids and learning to negotiate with them instead because it's preferable and not because adults said they had to. Those parents, their kids are in exactly the circumstance that is clearly breaking Mike's heart. And it is a heartbreaking circumstance. The other set of us, we will remember how much fun it was to make up our own games. And we remember how much fun it was to go places and do things and explore, and for things to be new to us, and for other kids to be our primary wall for bouncing ideas off of, or listening board, or whatever you want to say, about evaluating our environment and responding to our environment. And, having the parents there for questions and answers and important things like making sure you're safe and healthy and have things to eat and a safe place to sleep at night and stuff like that. And knowing that you're loved. But it's important to also know that you're free. And half the kids in the world are growing up without that. And the other half have that. And I think they're not going to get along very well as they get older. One of the best compliments that my son got working at his first job was they asked him if he was sure he was really as young as he said he was, because he worked like a Gen Xer, not like a member of his own generation. And it's because he learned a different way of doing things. He grew up learning to problem solve and learning to negotiate and deal with conflict with his peers and all of those things. When he needed me to be, a mama bear, was there to do that. There are probably people at his school that still think that I am the devil because I didn't let them subject him to allergens that were causing serious problems for him. But at the same time, I didn't take his freedom away. He didn't have it on the internet because that was too dangerous. But he could go out and play with his kids, and I didn't have to be sitting there watching him the whole time. He'd go out and play with his friends. They could play in the house. They played video games together. They watched movies and TV that maybe were not entirely age appropriate. All the stuff that we did when we were kids. They played at the park. They went on the monkey bars. There was not a mom standing at the bottom going, "Oh, don't fall down." So there will be kids in the next generations that do understand what it's like to go outside and play and be kids and be creative and learn. It just, the big difference in my case was anytime I started to give in to that feminine tendency to be super overprotective, like stupid levels of super overprotective, the father of those children, my husband, was there to say, hey, you're smothering them, cut that out. It's the kids that are raised in single mother households that don't get that benefit. Because there is no man in there to say, just wait a minute, let's see if they'll settle this together on their own before we step in and punish them for fighting. They may not need punished, they may just be working out their negotiation skills. So, you guys are way more important than you get credit for. And it makes it that much more important that you have control over when your family starts. So, this thing that's coming out, this vassal gel that's coming out as Plan A, like I said, I personally think that every guy ought to look into it, and every guy that is going to go against the advice to avoid being sexually active ought to at least take the advice to use this. So, Mike, I think your mic jack is loose. But in any case, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So, in addition to the list of all of the other things that we have debunked, we have also debunked the fact that unwanted pregnancy is an issue that is inflicted on women by the patriarchy. So no, the answer is women are not being murdered by the patriarchy through the weapon of forced pregnancy. Women are not forced to get pregnant. They are getting pregnant because they are careless. No, they don't need abortion because millions of women every year are suffering from life-threatening pregnancy complications. It's actually less than 20 per 100,000 pregnancies. It's less than 1% of all abortions being done is even for medical reasons at all. It's almost all elective, right? And no, women are not suffering from a situation of, well, they're stuck being pregnant because their birth control failed. They failed. Right? And no, abortion laws were not needed because prior to Roe versus Wade, women were dying in childbirth because they couldn't get abortions. It was legal to get an abortion even when abortion was illegal. It was legal to get an abortion if you were suffering from life-threatening health complications. Patriarchy killing women using forced birth? Debunked. With that, this has been some really dry material, I understand, but I hope that you guys will go through my links here that I have on the page. There are some links that I don't think we opened up, that there were other bits of the discussion that visited upon the same thing, so it gave people the information anyway. But I hope that you'll go through the low bar and look at the links. If you can't find them in the low bar, they will also be in the transcript post. It doesn't have the transcript for everything that we've said, but it does have the low bar links in the Honey Badger Brigade blog post for this episode, and it will have the same title as this episode. So all of those links are in that post, and they are also on our Patreon. In the public post for this episode, and they also will be in the low bar of the Rumble post for this episode. So there's 4 different places there where you can look for it. I'd like to see people make use of this information and these statistics. And for guys who are going to listen to me about vassal gel, If you want to stay engaged with Vassal Gel and learn what's coming up next and how the schedule is playing out and everything, the link to the page that you're looking at right now on the screen is the top one in the list of links, because I think it's the most important thing for you guys to have access to. Like, you can use the other links in arguments, and it's going back to the very beginning of the show when we were talking about the Trump win, that pushing the Overton window that we've been doing, you can see now how vital that is. It needs to be strong-armed on this topic, because women have been dominating the conversation on the topic, and men have every right and every reason and every responsibility to have their say. So I want to see men stepping up and standing up for themselves and promoting factual information in contradiction to the false allegation that women are oppressed by the patriarchy, keeping them from having their abortions. Right? That's not happening. You're not guilty of that. Voting for Trump does not make you anti-woman. It's not going to take women's abortions away from them in circumstances where they're going to die if they don't have the abortion. I don't know what he's going to do in regard to elective abortion. It's not really high up on my list of things I care about. I'm a lot more concerned about what he's going to do in regard to war, because that could result in the end of the human race as we know it if the trajectory we're on right now isn't stopped. But in terms of the hysteria that's being promoted about you right now, stand up for yourself. Point out that it's not true. Don't allow them to shame you. You did the right thing. And you had every right to do it. And you have every right to do it again. And if women don't like it, maybe they need to grow up. So with that, thanks everybody for listening. I don't know if either of my co-hosts have anything to add to that.
I'm still here.
I know.
My parents let me go nuts.
Yeah.
They let me go far more nuts than I ever did. And yeah, I know I go nuts sometimes in my videos. I know I go nuts sometimes in my reactions to what's going on nowadays. But I can only thank the previous generation. I can only thank my parents for letting me go as nuts as I did, for going as raised by wolves as I did, for letting me be the Calvin that I was. I don't even remember who my Hobbes even was. But I'm pretty sure I had a Hobbes. And yeah, the most important thing about raising the next generation is letting them have a Hobbes, is letting them go into nature and discovering it for themselves. And this bullshit we talk about with regards to the media and such, it really is nothing. It's nothing compared to what you can discover in nature. If you just let the next generation, or indeed the current generation, just go out into nature. I know it's become a meme to touch grass, but touching grass is all everything has ever been. Just going out into nature and touching grass. And if that's all you let your children do, then there's really nothing else. So just let them do that. It's a grand new world out there. I'm trying to remember what that last Calvin and Hobbes strip ever was, where they just went out into this blank slate. And they just painted anything they wanted onto this blank slate. There was this snowy landscape. So, yeah, just do that. There's nothing more you can offer your children than to just paint whatever they can on this blank slate. That'll do.
Okay. And you're right. And there's not really much I can add to that. It was one of the best things about growing up as a Gen Xer. Gonna make me cry. That's not easy to do unless you find me when I'm not okay and then ask me if I am. But one of these days we're gonna have to all get on here and start talking about our childhoods again, because like I've told a bunch of my childhood stories, and I had such an awesome childhood, and I wish everybody could have that. But in the meantime, I will say, thanks to parents everywhere that were dedicated to their children's welfare, that stayed married, that let their kids learn and grow and be kids while they were kids, explore the world and develop naturally. Thanks to dads everywhere for being the brakes on the mom safety net addiction train. Love you guys. And of course, thanks to my two co-hosts for listening to the driest material yet that I've gone over. I know this was a dismal subject, but it's so important to understand this stuff. Because the argument that we're going to be hit with, we need this information to fight back against it. And thanks to everybody that works in the background. It makes HBR Talk happen. I think I have read all of the super chats, all of the super chows, and we did not get any Rumble rants. I'm going to double check the super chows again, though, just to be sure. Yeah, that's the last one. So, good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.